Following the destruction of the Death Star during the Battle of Yavin, the Rebel Alliance was forced to abandon their base on Yavin 4, eventually settling in a new location in the Hoth system. The small, barren, icy world was the perfect location for a secret base. From there, Rebel leadership coordinated the actions of the Rebel Alliance across the galaxy. Meanwhile, the Empire desperately sought out the location of Rebel Command. And several years after the destruction of the Death Star, the Empire had finally found their mark. A probe droid launched by the Star Destroyers of Death Squadron landed on Hoth and encountered Rebel facilities, namely the shield generator that was protecting the planet. The probe droid was shortly thereafter destroyed by Rebel scouts, however, it had already sent the information back to the fleet. With the realization that this is the location of the Rebel base, Lord Vader ordered his forces to begin making for the Hoth system. However, the Rebel Alliance was aware that the Empire was en route, as one of the Rebel scouts had encountered the probe droid. As the rebels began making ready to evacuate Echo Base, the forces of Death Squadron arrived in orbit over Hoth. Death Squadron consisted of a single Executor class dreadnought, the Executor, the command ship of the squadron, as well as a number of Imperial 1 and 2 class Star Destroyers, including the Devastator, the Avenger, the Tyrant, and the Ultimatum. The Empire, however, was faced with a tricky situation. The Rebel Alliance had deployed a shield generator to protect their base from orbital bombardment. This also prevented Imperial forces from being landed too close to the facility. As a result, Imperial Star Destroyers fanned out and began a blockade of the planet, while Blizzard Force, a special cold weather division within the Imperial 501st Legion, was prepared for a ground assault. Deployed from several Gazanti-class assault carriers, the primary body of Blizzard Force involved in this engagement was 12 all-terrain armored transports, or AT-ATs. Within the bodies of these AT-ATs was an entire battalion of cold weather assault stormtroopers, the troopers of Blizzard Squadron. On top of this, however, we know that the Empire deployed at least 2 all-terrain scout transports, or AT-STs, as well as at least 1 Juggernaut. Meanwhile, the Rebel base, protected by its shield generator, included 30 GR-75 medium transports, which at this time would have been being loaded in preparation for an evacuation, a number of BTL A4 Y-Wing assault starfighters, a fleet of T-47 airspeeders, a number of T-65B X-Wings, a V-150 Planet Defender ion cannon, which would be crucial in covering the Rebel evacuation, as well as a number of DF-9 and 1.4 FD-P turret systems. Imperial forces set down at the rim of the Rebel shield generator and passed through the rim of the shield generator on foot within the hulls of the massive all-terrain armored transports. While Imperial forces began making their way towards Echo Base, at this point unopposed, the Rebel Alliance began evacuating via their GR-75s. The strategy they would use is they would momentarily drop their shield to allow the transport as well as a small fighter escort to pass through. And while the shield was down, the ion cannon would fire a few short bursts. These bursts would impact the guarding Imperial Star Destroyer and allow the Rebel transports to slip by. And the plan was to continue repeating this tactic until all the transports had escaped. The assault on Echo Base was essentially just a massive frontal assault. The squadron of all-terrain armored transports lumbered over the battlefield, raining fire down on Rebel defensive positions, with the rather light turrets present at the Rebel defensive positions being unable to penetrate the heavy armor of the assault walkers. Luckily, however, the squadrons of modified T-47 airspeeders did have a solution. Focusing on the few forward-most AT-ATs in the Imperial formation, and utilizing their tow cables, the T-47s were able to ultimately end up tripping the walkers, immobilizing them and leaving them vulnerable to planted explosives that could be placed there by ground forces. The Rebels were able to use this tactic to ultimately bring down Blizzard No. 2, one of the all-terrain armored transports. In the fighting, Blizzard 1, another one of the AT-ATs, was destroyed when a damaged airspeeder crashed into its cockpit, destroying the forward section of the vehicle and causing it to fall over. However, it's around that time that the AT-ATs were able to effectively clear the air, using the vehicles in the back to simply screen the ones in the front against enemy aircraft. One of the T-47s shot down was manned by Jedi Luke Skywalker, who now found himself on foot in the thick of the battle. Trying to make the best of the opportunity, he made his way to one of the approaching AT-ATs, Blizzard No. 4, and using a winch cable on his utility belt, he was able to pull himself up to the bottom of the vehicle, where he cut a hole in it and tossed a grenade in. This thermal detonator destroyed the vehicle from the inside, causing it to fall over, and ultimately rendering it as well useless in combat. However, those 3 AT-ATs were the only 3 destroyed in the engagement. The remaining 9 were able to advance on Rebel positions, ultimately overrunning the well-defended trenches the rebellion had dug, and once they were in range of the shield generator, it was ultimately destroyed. With the destruction of the shield generator, Imperial forces could now be landed within Echo Base, and this allowed Imperial stormtroopers to storm the inside of the facility. However, when Imperial forces arrived, they found that most of the rebel leadership and high-ranking individuals had already been evacuated on the transports that had managed to slip by the blockade. On top of that, now with the shield down, the ion cannon basically had free reign against Imperial Star Destroyers in orbit, so the transports were basically pouring out of the facility. While the Empire was able to seize control of Echo Base, ultimately driving the remnants of the Rebel Alliance off the planet, and claim a tactical victory in the engagement, many could argue that the Battle of Hoth was a Rebel strategic victory, with the Empire failing to capture or kill any members of the Rebel Alliance's leadership. The only element of the Rebel Alliance that was not able to easily slip away from the Empire during this engagement was the Millennium Falcon, one of the last vessels to leave Echo Base. It ended up in one of the nearby asteroid fields being pursued by several Imperial-class Star Destroyers. However, its inability to escape was due entirely to a faulty hyperdrive and not Imperial tactical brilliance. Ultimately, the Battle of Hoth was supposed to be the end of the Rebel Alliance, at least from the Galactic Empire's perspective. Destroying the Rebel Alliance's headquarters and capturing their leadership would have ultimately been a very serious blow to the Rebel cause. However, the ultimate conclusion of the battle didn't favor the Empire in its entirety. And the Rebel leadership that escaped the Battle of Hoth would ultimately muster forces for the Battle of Endor a year later, a battle that would seal the Empire's fate. Still, there is debate to this day as to whether the Empire can really claim the Battle of Hoth as an Imperial victory. I've actually done a video on that very topic, and I'll leave a link in the upper left-hand corner if you'd like to check that out. And if you have any other battles you'd like to see covered in future episodes of Battle Analysis and added to the archive, leave that down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.